summer holiday. No more.
Who wouldn't love a summer holiday on the island of Barbados? But today we're dropping in on a pop legend, Sir Cliff Richard, a man who has spent 23 years in the charts over an extraordinary period of 6 decades.
We're going where the sun shines bright.
41 years after the success of Summer Holiday, Cliff spends much of his time in Barbados, where he's built himself an idyllic retreat, well away from the glare of show business.
Let's see if it's true.
Cliff has agreed to show us around the island and has offered us an exclusive invitation to look around his Caribbean home.
For me and you.
Well, if this is going to be open house with Cliff Richard, these are my gates. I guess I should open them for you and say, welcome. This is my new acquisition, a home in beautiful Barbados, which is known by everybody, whether they live here or just come here for holidays, as paradise. And you can see why. It is just stunning. I have to tell you that just a year ago, nothing was growing here. This was just a dust bowl, just mud, muck, builders' muck. Oh, it was just horrific. But the reason why it looks like this is because the ratio of growth is 1 to 7. What takes 1 year to grow 1 foot in England, the same time here will have grown 7 feet. I've planted cabbage palms, which will be about 50 or 60 feet high very quickly. And of course, the reason you come, of course, is to see the house that I built, and here it is. What's nice about it is that I found a plot that already had mature trees, which you can see are just becoming into leaf, and it means that the house has been, it's cosseted in some way, and I think it gives it a maturity that's just terrific. And I could have put this driveway straight through to my front, but I found that we had a coral stone quarry, and rather than fill it in, I actually revealed it and planted lots of plants and stuff. So I now have a bridge that takes me across to the house. And of course, you've probably already noticed, one of the reasons for building this house here is right in the middle of the doorway. That sea is immense. And I can tell you this now, as you get nearer to it, the only thing that changes is that the view gets wider. Nothing disturbs it at all. But welcome to my home. This is a cool and wonderful place to be with this view that it just never stops. And every morning I wake up, I pinch myself thinking, is this really where I live here in Barbados? And there it is. Wider, 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 until finally you realize I've got a 180-degree view of the sea. So it's a fantastic place for me when I want to escape from the crowds. I can feel safe, secure, and very happy here. Now, you may be wondering, where the devil is Gloria? Well, I was running short of staff, and I put her to work in the garden. Gloria, where are you?
Hi, I'm over here with my trusty clippers. I tell you what, you are a hard taskmaster, Cliff Richard, because this is hard work.
I know. And what's more, she's not cheap.
I tell you, my hourly rate is pretty expensive.
Contrary to what I've heard.
How are you? You're a hard taskmaster, I'll tell you. It's hot work.
It is.
Let me
get rid of that. And let's go. Let me show you the pool area.
I must tell you, this house is truly magnificent. I know you've had me working in the garden, but it is beautiful.
It is lovely, actually. I mean, it's just a great spot to be. And of course, I was lucky in that they gave me the first choice of the plots to build on, and I do think I picked the best one.
You sure did. Now listen, this panoramic view, of course, is magnificent. But I know that you have other houses. So why did you want to build a house in Barbados?
Well, I suppose in the end I was thinking that this is a place where I can actually get to meet people more easily. It's really funny because since I haven't moved here, but since I started coming here, for instance, I got to know Cilla Black so much better.
Because she's just down the hill there, isn't she?
She lives just down the road here,
yes.
And Bob Monkhouse lives about a road and a half up. And all people that I've met and seen over the years, over the last 40-odd years, and suddenly one can say that we're getting to know each other a bit.
So you're more relaxed, obviously.
I'm very relaxed.
And making more time. No wonder you've got 2 months here at the moment. It's a long time.
But to be fair, I do have to work in that 2 months. I'm going to do a photo shoot, and I'm going to go to Nashville for a couple of weeks to start recording.
Excellent.
So and also that's good about Barbados. They actually have a studio on the island too, which I haven't checked out. But even if I can't use that studio, Miami's only 3.5 hours away.
Sure.
New York is 4 hours and something away. So I could get there, do my work, and come back to this wonderful place.
You're building up more excuses just to stay here longer and longer. Do you know what I love about this? In terms of the location, you know, you have the view of the sea, but you're not actually on the beach. You have a lot more privacy up here, which presumably is very important.
I'd stayed on the beach too, and it's very British, of course. The British have been supporting Barbados for years and years and years, and the Barbadians are very, very grateful for that. But if you have, you know, celebrity, and you're on the beach, people walk by your house all the time, and they're mostly all Brits, of course. So I've stayed on the beach and been recognized a lot, and that's not a bad thing, but if you're coming away to get away from that, then the best way to do it is to build your house on a ridge. And
You're probably on the boat tours there. They probably go, if you look up on the hill with your binoculars, you will see Cliff Richard swimming in his pool.
I've heard that they've started saying that, yeah. I hope they get the right house. In Portugal, I apparently own about 100 homes, because they point at every house they go by and say, oh, that's Cliff Richard's house.
Let's just look at the design of the house itself. I mean, I have to tell you, it's like a small hotel. It seems to go on forever.
It's only because I cheated in a way. There was enough land to stretch it. It's a 6-bedroomed house, and if you'd built it on double floors, it would have been, what, 25% less long. But what I thought was good in this respect was to be able to have 2 bedrooms on one side of the house, 2 bedrooms on the other. My little apartment thing's up there. And it's fantastic. Even when I've got my family and friends, it means if I want to get away from everybody, even from family, I can just escape up there. So
it's a very pretty house, don't you think? I think I'm right saying that the railings and so on is quite Bayesian in style. You see this pattern on the island quite a bit. Quite a bit, actually, and some people actually make a few changes to it. I didn't mind the fact that, I mean, when I travel around, I look at them, I think, oh, they've got my railings, but of course I've got theirs. They probably had theirs first. But just as you have the gazebo at the front, at the entrance, which I think is terrific, I also like this gazebo for the sunset. Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, that is just so beautiful. Well, I mean, also, it's what's nice about the house is that my friends and family, when they come, for instance, I'm always surprised that suddenly my sister and her husband, we won't see them, and they'll be quietly having a cup of coffee or a drink or something on their own terrace, or else they'll be sitting there, or else my sister Joan loves to sit in the pool on the seats, but she sits there reading a book with a gin and tonic. Now you're going to show me the garden, because all this growth has happened in 1 year, which is phenomenal. Are we going to do that now? Yes, we'll do it after commercial break. OK, well, let me show you how I've learned to walk on water. Stay where you are. At long last, eh? OK, I can only do this once. Ta-da! OK, I'll stick around waiting for you. I'll see you in the garden after the break. One for the calendar. Cliff, I know you were saying that you were very much involved in the design of the house. Now, does the same thing apply to the garden? Have you been, you know, with it right from the very beginning? Yes, I have. I was lucky to find a guy who actually works for a huge botanical garden here. John Leach, his name is. And when we came, for instance, to this area, which is a big slope, he said what we're going to have to do is terrace the place. So we kind of stood and he looked and said, we can have rocks there and rocks here and rocks everywhere. And I was able to say to him, I want it to look exotic. For instance, this is like being in a jungle. The size of these things. What are these plants called? They're called heliconias, and there are different types of heliconias, and the flowers grow in the shade inside. Look. Yeah, there are just loads in here, look. And look at these here, they grow like that. They've such a fantastic colour. Do you know you pay a fortune for these in flower shops? I know, I know. But I can't believe that I come out in the garden and cut these sort of things to put in a vase. It's phenomenal, really. And do you like doing that? I mean, do you like the thrill of being able to cut down exotic flowers and bringing them into the house? This trip, I have spent every day I've been in the garden at some point, just to prune things back. The amazing thing is, before you all got here, there was parts of this where we couldn't get by. Really? So we just hacked. So you're just like out with your machete? You hacking down. You hack it down, and believe me, it grows back so fast. That'll be another job for me later on with my clippers. Well, we'll put you to work. Now, you've got banana trees also around here, haven't you? Yeah, I know, it's amazing to think that, again, in 1 year, everything has happened. We actually put in these little stumps and they became banana trees, and we've actually started to take a few bananas off, because apparently you take them off just as they start to ripen, because otherwise the monkeys get them. But we've left one bunch hanging on a tree there, so that if the monkeys want them, they can have them. How accommodating you are to the monkeys. Well, do you quite like the idea of having monkeys in the garden? I do, actually, and we're going to plant mango trees, which will attract monkeys again. The only thing I was told was, do not encourage the monkeys close to the house. Some people feed them on the terrace. They apparently become really destructive. They can come and rip up your furniture and all that. So what we'll do is we'll leave the bananas on the periphery. We'll put the mangoes way down on the edge there. Sure. And if they want to eat them, that's fine. It'll be fun. But there are an awful lot of monkeys on the island, because I remember going over a road not a million miles from here called Apes Hill. Yes. And they just play in the road. The families they cross over the road. Play, yes. If you drive across, they often will come across the road, because there are a lot of banana trees anyway, and wherever there is any kind of food for them, they're attracted to it. So you could bump into a monkey anywhere. As you do. As you do. Now, the other thing I want to say, you start picking up the view from here again, don't you? Well, that's the thing about the whole piece of property. You never really
very far from a view of the sea. Even, you know, even from the tennis court, sometimes it's really difficult. We play tennis, and in between points we're going, look at that view. And
Particularly when you played a bad shot.
Yeah, I usually
look at the view.
I usually say to them, look at that view, and then I serve the ace.
Cliff's garden is an absolute delight. It's full of exotic plants and works of art, which he's picked up on his travels around the world. I love the way, actually, you put little pathways and walkways. It makes the garden very interesting, doesn't it?
Well, I'm trying to encourage people when they come to actually stroll around the garden, because it's such a pretty thing anyway. And hopefully in the end I'll have little nooks and crannies where there's a shady place with a little seat, maybe, and a statue or something.
Sure.
People could sit quietly and read. But you can grow down in this gully, you see. We could have filled it up and just put a pathway straight round from the drive to the front door. But I thought it would be a waste of what is actually a rather beautiful little area that will eventually allow me to grow, well, it does now, plants that grow in the shade. Like underneath these leaves, there's anthuriums growing here, and they like the shade. So it's a perfect place for it.
And do you physically go off and buy the plants?
Many times I have done, yes. I mean, I treated myself to a Ford F-150 pickup truck. You know,
You're a trucker.
I am.
Hey.
The Dukes of Hazzard have got nothing on me, I tell you. But I go out, I've used that to pick up furniture, jammed it with palm trees, absolutely jammed it with palm trees with the old bungee leads all holding them, then drive back here and get the gardener to help me unload them. So again, another reason for people to come and
Another
be
bit
in
of
this
a hike
area.
up here.
Yeah, you're going to make it?
What do you mean,
Okay.
am I going to make it? If I can hack down your plants, I'll make it up here, I'll tell you.
God, I feel like David Bellamy without a beard.
These days he seems to know nearly as much as David Bellamy. But having shown me around the garden, Cliff was keen to take me out and about to demonstrate just what makes this island so special to him. First, though, he wanted to find out if there's any shopping he needed to pick up on the way. So it was a chance for me to meet his Bayesian housekeeper come cook, Jasmine.
The hub of the world.
And this, I bet, is the famous Jasmine.
This is Jasmine. This is Gloria.
How are you? You
I'm
too.
fine, thank you.
So Jasmine keeps you together then, body and soul.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she'll cook us anything we want. She cooks great chicken, does great pork, and the flying fish.
How do you cook your flying fish?
Well, we season it with things that grow in Barbados mostly, like the thyme from the garden.
Parsley.
And parsley, and
Lovely.
sweet marjoram. We get all that stuff from the garden, and we just chop it and season the fish with it and dip it in some flour and egg batter and then some breadcrumbs and fry it.
And you fry it.
But sometimes you make it in a kind of chili
Yes,
sauce.
A little Creole
A little
sauce.
Creole
yes.
sauce, fantastic.
That's the one.
And then,
I
of
like.
course, we just want this as prime exhibit number one.
Pesto
Because
sauce.
Sir Cliff Richard made this pesto sauce all by himself.
Basil from the garden, pine nuts, olive oil, garlic. It's very...
Bingo.
It's bingo. Absolutely
Now listen, the
fantastic.
thing is that we're all, as you see, we're all dressed ready to go
Yeah,
to
we're gonna
town.
go.
You're going to give me a little bit of a
I'll show
tour.
you around town and I'll pick up some flying fish.
Okay.
Is that what you need?
So
We'll see
do
you,
that.
Jasmine.
Okay, Jas. See you later.
Okay, thanks, Noel. See you
You
later.
can put that back in the deep freeze. Thanks. Okay.
You're gonna find me out in the country.
The thing I was going to say about Barbados is the fact that you have all the opulence of the bigger houses, but very much alongside, you know, some of the smaller, typically Bayesian properties.
Chattel properties, yeah. Here's a chattel house coming up on the left. I was very curious as to why most of these places weren't painted, and apparently if they paint their homes, they have to pay 50% more in their insurance.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Which is a shame, really, because they're very pretty houses, and with a lick of paint, they'd look terrific in terms of tourism.
Sure.
A tourist driving around Barbados would prefer to see them painted. I'll take you to Chattel Village, which is a tourist area where they built these little chattel shops. And you can see what the potential for the island was if all the homes were painted that colour.
Look at these, all the colours
I
and
know.
everything. Aren't they gorgeous?
Well, yeah, it's a place for people to come and buy gifts and memories of the place.
But
And of course,
I'm just going to say they're so indicative of the island, though,
Oh,
aren't they?
very.
It's
Oh,
so
yeah, very.
traditional that it was a good
Absolutely.
idea to do this. And you're going to
Yeah.
get one of these, aren't you? for your
well, I would like
place?
to have one in my garden. And we're passing
Oh, this
the
house, now,
Rousings.
this is quite a famous house.
Yeah, this is Greensleeves, and that's owned by Hans Rowson, who I believe is the richest man in Britain.
That's right. I think it was 8-point-something billion. He was listed
Unbelievable
recently
amount of
as
money, yes.
having.
And they say that I think 50 of the richest men in Britain have
but
home somewhere.
live on this island.
Yeah.
Isn't it
Sweet.
strange that in history, all the poorer people were put on the beach because of the
I know, it's
hurricanes
laughable.
and everything coming in, and all the rich people lived in the plantation houses up the hill.
Because it was cooler.
And now it's in reverse. Everybody's screaming for a beach property.
All those plantation owners must have, I mean, they would die now to think that this is so much more valuable than
Sure.
the other side of the road.
Our next port of call was one of Cliff's favourite places, the local fish market.
Okay, this is it, Glo.
Okay. So how often do you come down here, like every day or something?
Well, we have flying fish a lot.
Fantastic.
We'd like to have some flying fish and a bit of mahi-mahi. Yes. And the mahi-mahi, of course, is what they call dolphin here.
Dolphin.
Yeah, but
Are you
it's
going
not.
to some dolphin?
It isn't really dolphin.
Yeah? And this is the flying fish.
This little flying fish that Jasmine makes such a wonderful
So
job
there's
of.
2 of these?
Yeah, I think a couple of those would be fine. Yeah.
Right. Is that this,
There are
this
big fish eaters on the island. Yes, that's it. Kind of green-coloured fish.
This is enough for you?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Oh, it's great
Right, thank
atmosphere
you.
though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Very local. Very, very
Excellent.
local.
Okay. Well, by now we were ready for a long, cool drink, so we dropped into one of Cliff's favourite watering holes on the beach. People who've been coming to Barbados for years and years and years would know this place as the old Mullins Beach Bar.
Oh, yeah.
Very famous, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was very famous. The first time I came here on a cruise liner, I thought, well, I must go and see it. So we came here, and by the bar back there, you used to have to just stand in the crowd, tell them you want a table for 5 or whatever it was, and then drink your rum punch and stuff, and it was a real buzzy place. And, of course, they serve very nice food
So
here,
therefore,
too.
this is your closest beach?
Yeah, it is. Well, technically, no, it's not the closest, but it's probably the most accessible. And it's a very nice beach. And, of course, they have the water sports, so I've had friends who come down with their children, and they love to get on jet ski and fly down the coastline here for a half an hour. So it's a perfect little spot, actually. It looks like a private beach, but it doesn't stop a Bajan from walking in, putting their towel down and sitting right next to you. I love that.
It's good enough for me.
It's
So
good
cheers,
enough for me.
Cliff. Yeah.
Cheers.
Great.
Cheers to Barbados.
This matches your T-shirt. Colour coordinated.
Of course, as ever.
Back at Cliff's house and surrounded by the luxury lifestyle which he's worked so hard to enjoy, it all seemed a far cry from those childhood days when he was little Harry Webb. Do you ever cast your mind back to that time when you were 8, getting off that boat from India and England, all that sort of
Yeah,
stuff?
I mean, I can never really forget those days. And in a way, it sounds ridiculous, but I'm so glad that my family went through that. And certainly I'm glad that I went through it, because I can never, ever forget those times. When we lived in India, my parents were quite well off. Not that they were wealthy, but they didn't have to pay for anything. My father's company paid for the apartment we lived in, all the staff that looked after us. And of course, the staff made it difficult for my mum. When we finally came to England and had no money at all, my father arrived with 3 children, a wife, and £5 sterling, that's all. My grandmother put us up for about a year, and then my father's sister, my aunt, took us in after that, and that's when we really had it. We weren't ever lower than that. There were 5 of us, and then 6. My sister Joan was born. So there were 6 of us living in a tiny room. It was our toilet, our dining room, our bedroom. And because of that, it was a real major turning point. Because of that situation, a neighbor who happened to work for the council befriended my mother and came in and was shocked. And we suddenly found that we were jumped to the top of the queue for a council house. And so things began to improve drastically once we got our own little home. But how can I ever forget that? So that when I wake up and look at this, it makes this that much more tasty.
So with a background then of 6 to a room and that kind of environment in a council house, how did you then start to break away and find these ambitions to be a singer?
I'm never quite sure how it started, really, because I remember reading a letter that I'd written to a pen friend in Australia, and she'd kept it, and only about 4 or 5 years ago sent me a photofax copy of it. And it simply said, my name is Harry Webb. I am 12.5 years old. I then stated in my letter what schools I went to, and it said my ambition is to be a famous singer. At 12.5, Gloria, I don't remember at 12.5 having that ambition. But I must have had there, it was written down. Now, when I was 12.5, I don't think Elvis had started. But Elvis, when he came and kicked the scene apart, that's the time when I thought I could do it, that it's possible for someone like me to do it. I didn't think I would, but I felt I could.
It's quite interesting when you talk to a lot of performers and singers, the influence that Elvis had.
Oh.
Was it the power of this American music coming through, or was it the image of Elvis?
I think it's all of those things, because the music came through and it was completely different to everything we'd been hearing before that. And suddenly this kind of animal magnetism came out in the form of Elvis, craziness in the form of Jerry Lee Lewis, wonderment of harmonies in the Everly Brothers, and suddenly we were going, wow, this is what we want to do. This is our music. All I can remember is that I just wanted to sing it. I needed to just sing it.
So how thrilling was it then when you started to knock Elvis off the #1 slot in the charts?
Well, it was always a fantastic thing for me just to find myself in competition with Elvis. I mean, one of the first things that I remember being really thrilled about was waking up in the morning and opening one of those musical papers and seeing the headline, Elvis and Cliff battle it out in the charts. Well, I'm thinking, last year I was just leaving school, and suddenly Move It is battling with Elvis. So it was a great thrill for me.
Come on!
Welcome back to Sir Cliff Richard's sumptuous home on the island of Barbados, where we're casting our minds back to 40 years ago and those early hits.
Move It never made it to #1. A lot of people think it did, but it made it to #2. I'm not grumbling at all. But about my third or fourth record was Living Doll.
Well, we're going to move it as well, but Cliff will be back right after the break.
The story behind that one was that I recorded it for a film called Serious Charge. We had not read the small print. None of us, the Shadows and I, we didn't really like the song that much. So we did it the way it was written by Lionel Bart, which was dong, do 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 dong, got myself a dong, like a little pop rock thing. And Norrie Paramore suddenly said, well, we've got to do the single now. And we said, what single? He said, well, I'm afraid the small print requires that you do a single for the film company. So we were in Sheffield City Hall, and Bruce and Hank and the others and I were sitting around, and Bruce said, what about if we do it like this? I got myself crying, like a strummy country song. And we thought, okay, that's better. And of course, we released it thinking, this is not going to be very good. And it went to #1, and we grew to love it. I didn't think it was going to be a song like Living Doll that would give me my #1. If I'd thought about #1s at all, I thought it was going to be some rip-roaring rock and roll thing. And in the end, it was a Living Doll, which was, again, musically, certainly a turning point for me, because it brought me a succession of records that weren't out-and-out rock and roll songs, all part of the rock culture, the pop rock culture. But I had hits with ballads like All in the Game, and much later, Miss You Nights. And it was good for me to be able to do that as well, because now when you do a concert, you need to have dynamics. And so I have dynamics just within the successful records I've had.
Sure. Now, you talked about the Shadows, and of course, that was also a phenomenal period.
Oh, yeah.
You were all young musicians, performers together. But it was right at the beginning of your career when really none of you had very much money. And I gather on the road it was the good old classic B&B.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's where we stayed. We didn't stay in hotels. That first tour where the Kalin twins were the top of the bill, I didn't have it. Well, I was just part of the billing. Also appearing was. And the Shadows and I, we had it, because there were 5 of us, you see, what we did, we planned sitting at the back of the bus. When the bus stops, we'll run in 5 different directions. So we'd all go and run off in 5 different directions and say, we must come back in 15 minutes, came back in 15 minutes. Okay, what did you find, Hank? He said, I found one. It serves breakfast in the morning. It's 15 shillings a night. And Bruce says, no, but I've got eggs, bacon, and fried bread, and it's 12 and 6 a night. And so we'd then take the cheapest one that gave the best offer.
But I remember Brian Bennett, your drummer, talking about playing in the bedroom, rehearsing with a cardboard box.
Oh, yeah.
And writing songs just on the bed. Everybody sat around and wrote what became hit records.
The boys would always have their guitars with them. Unlike today where we have roadies that carry everything, you know, you don't see your guitar from one show to the other. It's all taken, delivered, tuned, cleaned, all that. But in those early days, obviously, it was just almost strapped to your back and you went through. And so we used to sit around hotels writing and things like that. And yeah, because he didn't have his drums with him, he'd just sit there with a pair of sticks going, I could easily fall in love with you. And that's how it was done. It was just the way we did it. And I'm sure it's not unique, but it was special.
All right, we know that it's 5 decades of hits, really.
Yeah.
And the thing that I admire about you is that although you're in your 60s and having had those 5 decades, you are still as competitive as ever. None of that seems to have disappeared.
No, I don't know that it will, really, because when they count up how many weeks you've spent in the charts, and it turns out to be almost half your career, 23 years in the charts. It is quite amazing. I mean, it really is amazing. And that creates the ambition to go on attempting. I don't know whether I'll ever take over completely from Elvis, because he actually sold, I always make a joke of this, he sold more records after he died. And as I tell my fans, I'm not that ambitious. So I'm happy to be...
There the ambition ends.
Yeah, number 2 to Elvis is absolutely fine by me. But one day, if I was to take over on a more permanent basis, I'd be very happy.
You've got a few recordings coming out in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I have. Well, one, of course, is going to be a compilation album of Christmas success that I've had in the past. I was a bit anti that, and I said to EMI, who I'm not signed with anymore, but of course they own all my previous material. I said, look, please, let me come back and record at least a half a dozen songs that I've not recorded before, just to give the fans an interest. One of them is a brand new track, and 5 are tracks that are favorites of mine from other Christmas hits.
For example?
For example, Walking in the Air by Aled Jones, that one. I did a wonderful version of that, though. You may not like it as much as Aled's, but I do. I've also done Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow. So it'll be of interest to people, hopefully, that I've added some new stuff.
These days, you're able to live in your house here in Barbados and still work, because I know you dash off to Nashville every so often. Is that going to be an out-and-out country album, or is it just a way of making an album with different musicians and a different tone, if you like?
I don't know whether it's going to sound country or not, because I'm working with people who write country music. Some of them have had big #1 hit country songs before, and so it was a matter of meeting all of them, and I found it quite, it built me a whole new form of enthusiasm, because, you know, recording is a pleasure, but getting the stuff played is tough. So now I'm thinking that maybe if I can go a whole different route with a whole different group of producers and a whole different group of writers, maybe there'll be a spark that's there that might get me back into playlists again.
And of course, you never know, it may reopen America for you.
That would be nice. Although I'm torn, because the anonymity I enjoy in America is something that I suppose it's worth giving that up. If I can have one huge, huge hit in the States, album-wise I'm talking, then it will probably be worthwhile giving up anonymity.
Actually, the one aspect about living on the island of Barbados is the fact that you seem to get anonymity. People seem to leave you alone, and you can just do what I would call ordinary things.
Yes, I mean, I think the Bajans, if they know me at all, it's from way back. Like, if you say your name, we had the sort of power people come to look at our electrics here, and he said, whose name shall I put down? I said, Cliff Richard. He went, Cliff Richard, the singer? I went, yes. He went, hey, man. You know, so he knew me, but it wasn't instant recognition.
So you must love that. You must love the relaxation of that.
I like it very much. I guess it's because when I was much, much younger, why don't they recognize me? I'd be saying, what, you know, why do they see him and not, why don't they recognize me? Now, I suppose I have security in my career. If they don't recognize me, it's not going to change my career. And so I try to get by without being spotted. And it's quite nice.
Cliff's not the only superstar to enjoy privacy here on Barbados. This island has become a real celebrity hideaway, which means you never know just who might drop in.
Hi, Cliff. It's Virginia.
Hi, Virginia. Come on in.
Oh, thanks. Okay.
Virginia Wade, former Wimbledon champion and winner of 7 other Grand Slam titles, lives just up the road from Cliff. And the two of them often get together for a game on Cliff's private court. Well, I couldn't believe my luck. An exclusive front row seat as 2 living legends battled it out on the court.
Here it comes. Oh, great shot, Cliff.
I tell you, Cliff, I'm impressed by your forehand.
Why are all the balls on my side of the net? That's what I want.
Is he showing promise then, Virginia?
I tell you, he's got such concentration and he enjoys it so much.
I've got Agassi coming in tomorrow, and then Sampras. But I thought today I'd start at the top.
You got the best today.
You are funny. I guess that's why we love you. Nice shot. Oh, you beast!
Ah!
Your forehand's great.
Are we going to stop there?
I think we might fake one.
Mm.
Sing it.
That was terrific.
Well, there you go.
Tell you what, there's nothing like finishing on a really good shot, particularly when it's yours, Cliff.
I know.
I thought you would like
I
some
know.
water,
Oh,
actually.
yeah, I love
You would have to drink a lot when you're
Yeah.
playing in this
Thanks,
sort of
thank you.
heat.
Oh, you must actually in this kind any kind of warmth. You have to do
Yes.
because you pour out so much.
It's funny, we were joking earlier on saying if you're going to have a hit, it might as well be with a former Wimbledon champion.
I know.
It's obscene, Cliff, it really is.
I know. It's called the perks of pop. Honestly, when people say, did pop change your life? And I'm tempted to say no, it didn't, but of course it did. I got to meet people like Virginia.
I wouldn't care who you were, as long as you were just you, Cliff.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I love the way, I love playing with you, I seriously
Really?
do. You
Well,
have, you concentrate so well, you obviously have a great time, and he's pretty good, you know.
Pretty good.
He's
I noticed that.
sporty.
I'm getting better because I play with
But
all
I
these-
noticed that you
play
hit.
with
You
all these
don't actually
players.
play games as such, you just have a hit. Well, now listen, if you guys want a game with me later on, I'm prepared to do that, okay? I'll really give you a challenge.
Actually, Philip, I thought you were overdressed for a ball girl.
Imagine a still summer's day when nothing is moving, least of all me. I lay on my back in the hay. The warm sun was soothing, it made me feel good.
I have to say, Cliff, I do not know where you get your energy from, because to play in that heat.
Well, I
is
must admit,
awful.
playing in heat is debilitating. One does get a bit, one flags. But if you're playing someone like Virginia Wade, of course, I mean, they're not trying to beat the living daylights out of you. So it's not bad. But I like it, you see. I like playing like practice tennis is where we were doing, because then it's aerobic. You run and stretch and jump and all that, and then I feel it's doing me good physically. I don't mind sweating, to be honest with you.
So your energy level is always pretty good. And it
Yeah,
always
it's
looks
always-
as if it's good on stage and everything.
Yeah, it's always pretty high. I've never had any trouble with that at all. I mean, for years and years, I had trouble with my back. And then when I started playing tennis, my back seemed to get better. And so I must have built muscles or something in my back, which has helped the whiplash effect. And so I try to play it whenever I can. I'm sure it's beneficial for health and safety.
I know we make a virtue in a way of the fact that you've been 5 decades in the business and you're now in your 60s, but how do you view that whole prospect of getting older, if I can put it like that?
Well, I mean, I used to think about getting older just before my 40th. And when the 40th was looming, I'm thinking, oh, here we go, you know, 40, life begins at 40. I'm thinking, oh, it doesn't for me. I've been going for so long, 40 just seemed to be... Anyway, I got to 40 and there was no pain involved. When I got to 50, I remember having a party at my house in England, and I invited everybody on, not on the 14th of October, but the 13th. And at the stroke of midnight, I said, look, nothing's changed. And in a way, it was a lesson for me as well. It was a message to me saying, look, why do we really bother about it? If you're lucky enough to have good health, age is not actually a problem. Obviously, if you do suffer with some kind of ailment, then it's going to, you know, obviously it's not a pleasant thing to get old. But so far, so good, and I'm not even going to think about it. I think while I can play tennis, I will, and while I can run around and do my concerts, I will.
You and I have talked so many times over the years, on air and off air, about cosmetic surgery. We always said, we'll have it done together. I still haven't had it done yet. I need it desperately. What have you had done so far yourself?
Everything.
You have not.
I've had a body tuck. I had my legs lifted.
Did you have your bottom lifted as well, like Kylie?
No.
No.
No, I haven't.
But you've had bits done though, haven't you? You had your Botox and stuff.
Yeah, I've tried that, but I kind of went off that. My eyebrows dropped. At least I felt like I couldn't see my eyebrows. And when I looked in the mirror, I thought, it doesn't look right.
Because that actually would have solidified the forehead, wouldn't it?
Well,
That's the
yeah,
effect
it's
it has.
things like lines. I suppose you can get rid of it with the scalpel. I'm not quite sure what they do, but they can get rid of that. But the Botox seemed to be the easy solution. You just had an injection and it wasn't painful. But the effect for me was that my eyebrows seemed to drop and I didn't like the look of it.
So is there anything, I mean, about your face that bothers you now? Or do you feel
No,
comfortable
not
in your
really.
skin?
You know, I can't grumble, really, can I?
No.
People still, you know, insist on calling me the Peter Pan of pop, which I find a terrific pressure. I'm not the Peter Pan of pop. I'm never ever going to be 16 the rest of my life. You know, I don't even. If I look less than my age, I really still consider myself really lucky. So I just think, well, I'll face it as it happens.
You're not against the principle of cosmetic surgery at some
certainly
point?
not. I mean, if my career is still going when I'm 70 and everything's sagging, well, I'm afraid I'll have it done. I don't care, who knows?
Will you give me a shout when you're going in?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So what is it then that drives you? Is it money? Is it more fame? Keeping up your level of success? What do you think the driving force is?
I suppose it's... I can't speak for other artists, but it seems to me that if you consider yourself an artist, whether you be a painter, a dancer, actor, singer, you must surely be thinking, I can do things better, you know. I can definitely do it better. I mean, and I'm already thinking about how my next concerts will look. And I guess that's true of painters too, isn't it? Once you've done a painting, you never achieve perfection. No one does.
Tell you what, you pretty well achieved perfection in this gazebo. What a good placing. I mean, at this time of the day when the sun is beginning to go down, it's perfect, isn't it?
It's one of the most peaceful times of the day. And of course, because the temperature drops a little, not a great deal in Barbados, but it does drop. And even now there's a gentle breeze blowing. You could prepare yourself for the evening, come here with your whatever you like to drink, and sit and watch the sun go down.
It's the joy of having the time to sit in your gazebo. But I tell you what about another change of clothes and maybe off out to for dinner or something?
Well, I mean, there's only one place to go.
Where's that?
Here.
yeah, with Jasmine in your kitchen.
Yeah,
yes.
well, what reputed to be the best restaurant on the island, and it probably is, although there are some very nice ones even nearer here. But the Cliff is very good.
Well, I think Cliff at the Cliff sounds pretty good.
Yes.
And I could be glow in the glow.
Absolutely glowing, if I may say so.
Stay with us after the break. Well, it doesn't come much better than this. An intimate dinner for two at one of the best restaurants in Barbados. And yes, it's just Cliff and me. But to add to the atmosphere, some very noisy birds. And thank you very much indeed. And the way this is built right over it. I mean, I know that this is one of your favourite restaurants, but I mean, we couldn't miss it. We couldn't miss Cliff at the Cliff.
Sir Cliff at the Cliff.
Well, that's true, Sir Cliff at the Cliff. Did it take you a while to get used to all of that, or did you slip into the mode rather quickly?
No, well, it didn't take me long. It took me about a weekend.
What, that long?
Well, I heard about it on a Friday, and I don't know whether the press hit on a Saturday, I can't remember, but it was like a weekend, and I didn't go out, because I wasn't sure how to respond to people if they ever said anything to me, or whether they might all go, Sir Cliff Richard, you know, they might laugh or whatever. So I stayed in. And then on the Monday, I know that I had to go that weekend to collect my tickets for Wimbledon tournament, which is starting in a couple of weeks' time. So I rushed out on the Monday, and when I arrived at Wimbledon, there were a lot of geezers working on the marquees and all of that, putting Wimbledon together. And there was one guy sitting at the side with sandwiches and a bottle of beer. And as I walked in, he went, "Hello, Sir Cliff, all right?" And I went, "Yeah, fine, thank you." And it sounded terrific. And I got into it fairly quickly.
So how long did it take you to change your passport and your driving license?
Not that long. I did it fairly quickly, because, you know, the whole thing about the award is that Mr. is a title, as is Master or Mrs. or Miss or whatever, and they remove the Mr. and you're now Sir. So I got it done to my credit card and my passport, obviously, and the license. So it's definitely...
And it got us into the restaurant.
It certainly did.
But thinking about, you know, the more royal occasions, I mean, obviously, you got your knighthood from the Queen, but I only have to think back to the Jubilee concert.
Oh, yeah.
Was it a highlight of yours?
Oh, I think it rates pretty highly, because backstage, there seem to be no egos. That's what I like. The funny thing is, it was a very, very nice affair. I know that the Queen was really happy with the way things went. I mean, 1.5 million people turned up outside the palace. This is no laughing matter. It was really seriously supportive for the Queen.
And it ended up with the most brilliant shot of you and Ozzy Osbourne and the Queen.
I know.
Thought you could not have anybody more diverse.
Well, that's true, actually, although, funnily enough, when I recorded Millennium Prayer, there was this great hoo-ha about Millennium Prayer. I mean, I can't believe it was that controversial a record that I made, but obviously it was. But Ozzy from Birmingham was really, he said, good on him. I saw these headlines saying, oh, Cliff, good on him, you know, he's had a hit, who cares what people think? And I was really surprised that he would be on my side, so to speak. But as you say, you think of Ozzy Osbourne chewing off chicken heads and all that, and suddenly there I am with the Queen and Ozzy.
It's funny, you mentioned an interesting point there in passing. You're saying that Ozzy Osbourne came to your defence, which brings us to the point of criticism, because despite 5 decades of great success, you have had your knocks and you still get them. Is it easier to take now or not?
No, I don't. It's never easy. You know, when people who don't really know you write about you and say cruel, even if they're true things, they're sometimes really cruel, I don't see how one can not feel pain from it. And so that hasn't changed at all. In fact, Kenneth Branagh won't remember this probably, but I found him very helpful. Derek Jacobi, who I know, said to me, do you want to come down and watch a bit of filming? He was in Hamlet and Kenneth was directing. Well, his first question was, how's it all going with the plans for Heathcliff? And I said, well, it's going all right, but you know, the press are giving me such a hard time. They were saying, you will never be able to do it, you shouldn't do it, you're going to fail at it. And it was all negative stuff, and you almost begin to believe it. And I said to him, I wished I could have a really thick skin so that they couldn't harm me. And he said, no, 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 don't ever wish that upon yourself. The reason why we are artists is because we have very fine skin. We are very sensitive creatures and we hurt easily. If you hurt, it means you're still all right. And I felt better for that, but it's
Can you ignore it? Do you get to a stage where you can just ignore it and move on or not?
No, I think what I've learned is you can't really ignore it, because whether you like it or not, that whole phrase about no smoke without fire, even though journalism has actually blown that one right out of the water. They actually make up stories about you, so there is no truth based on it, and yet the people reading it will think there's no smoke without fire. So you can't really ignore it. You have to try and maybe put it right. Just recently, I've made up my mind that I'm never going to speak about my friends again to the press. You know, it's all right when you're doing it on television, because people look in your eyes and they can make up their mind right there and then whether they believe you or not. And they hear what you're saying straight away. But they've been really cruel to friends of mine who are not even in show business. Not made up, but talked about them, and they are friends of mine who have had a breakdown in a relationship. Now, that's never an easy time. For the press to stab them and say this and that about them, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, and they're not even in show business, they're just friends. You have to make up your mind about things, and as I've decided now, if I'm asked about my friends, will never mention them by name. I'll say, sorry, no, next question.
Good for you. Next question is, it's all about the movies. Because you've made, how many, is it 8 you've made to date?
I think it's about 8, maybe 9, but 8, beginning with that fairly obscure black and white movie called Serious Charge.
But you have some fabulous photographs, and the ones that I like best are the ones that come from Wonderful Life, you know, where you dressed up, you had like a 20-minute sequence of all sorts of people. Now, what do you remember about the dressing up and the character bits?
Well, they got me all done up as Groucho Marx, and they had Harpo, Melvin Hayes, and I remember that Susan Hampshire was dressed up as Greta Garbo. And she would fly through wearing a grass skirt with Harpo following with a lawnmower, and as they went by, my head would come out with a tent, and I'd say, with her grass skirt and my grass skirt, we can make hay. And it was great fun to do. We weren't even sure where these lines came from. They would just hand it to us.
And the Charles Boyer line?
Oh, the Charles Boyer, they got me all dressed up with this fez on, you know. Was it something about, I don't know your name, but the fez is familiar. But I would stand there with my hands in my pockets saying, would you join me in the Casbah? And they would cut to Greta Garbo and she'd say, but I want to be alone. And then I would say, we will be alone. It'll just be you, me, and the camel. And the thing is, the camel was on a mountain. You could hardly see it. It was way over in the distance. But it was great fun to do all of that nonsense.
Well,
it was
photographs are incredible. I mean, a lot of different changes of clothing, a lot of different setups.
Yeah. The thing is that it's like going to a party where they say, let's get dressed up, and they give you a theme. Everyone loves all that. To actually be doing a movie, and remember, we were all in our sort of early to mid-20s. We were having the most fantastic time, a really wonderful time, enjoying just being on the sand dunes, being in good weather, and being allowed to impersonate people that sometimes we didn't really know them at all.
But then, of course, we could have the Cliff Richard story, because as we've learned throughout this program, there's a lot to it. Taking your family background in India. Now,
you mean like a movie or something like that?
A movie or a television movie, certainly.
Well, yeah, but if they did that, I would definitely have to play the younger Cliff Richard.
And who would you get to play the older one?
Well, I think I'd probably get Robbie Williams to be an old geezer.
Cliff, we've had the most tremendous fun. Thank you very much. It's been lovely to come to the island of Barbados to meet you and see your house, of course.
Well, I knew you'd enjoy
it.
it.
Oh, we've loved it, and thanks for opening your doors. And look at this setting.
I know. And
I have to tell you, darling, the lighting at this time of the day is perfect.
It's wonderful, especially if you bring your own.
Thanks a million, Cliff. And
Pleasure,
cheers.
Cheers,
Thank you
darling.
very much.
Good to see you again.